Welcome to Fusion Forum, the podcast nourishing your creative soul. Sponsored by Fusion Theater Company, Albuquerque's own professional producing theater company located in the land of enchantment. That would be the great state of New Mexico. Today, I'm welcoming theater artist, writer, poetry lover, Fusion family member, and presently finance associate at Netflix, my great friend, Evan Garrett. Welcome to Fusion Forum.
Hi, Laurie. How are you?
Good. So when did you officially make the move from New York to LA?
It was October 14th of last year. And I knew that because I moved from Chicago to New York October 14th, 5 years before that, too. So it was a really great bookend.
Wow. Now, I know that you have really good friends and artists back in New York. Do you know how they're doing? Have you been able to stay in touch?
I have. They're doing very well. Their spirits are really high. A lot of my friends are freelance in, production, film production, and they're, having a great time, kind of. And they also
Quarantining.
keep quarantining. Yeah. They also keep sending me screen grabs of how many times they've applied for unemployment or tried to call unemployment lines. I'm just like,
right.
Rooting for them.
Oy. Yeah. So now that you're in LA, what's the most striking thing in LA to you right now while everybody is in quarantine?
You know what's so funny was back in February, I was like, I feel like I finally moved to LA. I'm ready to go out and see LA and everything it has to offer, go to the museums, and then, we got shut down.
Right.
But I think the big difference between LA and New York is, just the sprawl of it. And with that kind of the sprawl of culture, there's a lot of culture here, but I feel in New York that's very dense and you can kind of just stumble out of your apartment and walk into a play. Whereas here you really kind of have to plan it out, see what's around,
Yeah, it's very much a car culture, like Albuquerque to a certain extent. We're a car culture too. Yeah. So let me ask you a little bit. What's your life like? What's your work life like at Netflix right now?
It's pretty kind of what you would maybe consider a standard 9 to 5. I at least before quarantining, I would show up, do my work, and then leave at a same business office. Now we're all working from home, which is a lot of Google Hangout meetings and stuff like that. And it's an adjustment. It's also hard, but I think that's just part of this new normal as people are talking about it. So,
sure. What's going on with production? I mean, what is everything at a halt? What's happening with that?
Yeah, so basically everything, all production, I'm pretty sure across the field is halted on a pause or something like that. I know that there's some networks, like I think CBS's All Rise show is trying to do a quarantining episode where they're going to try to film, actors from a safe distance or through Zoom calls and stuff like that. But on the grand scale, like production across the world, I think is pretty much stopped.
Yeah. We are actually doing this interview on Easter Sunday. And in honor of Poetry Month, you have been posting poems on Facebook every day for a bit. And I'm just enthralled with the choices. They're extremely evocative and relevant for our present time. And I thought I would invite you to read the poem that you posted today for Easter, if you wouldn't mind.
I'd love that. All right. This is Easter in Pittsburgh by James Lawlin. Even on Easter Sunday, when the church was a jungle of lilies and ferns, fat Uncle Paul, who loved his liquor, so would pound away with both fists on the stone pulpit, shouting, "Sin, sin, sin," and the fiery fires of hell. And I cried all afternoon the first time I heard what they did to Jesus. It was something the children shouldn't know about until they were older. But the new maid told me, and both of us cried a lot, And so Mother got another one right away, and she sent away Miss Richardson, who came all the way from England because she kept telling how her fiance, Mr. Bowles Lyon, died suddenly of a heart attack. He just said one day at lunch, "I'm afraid I'm not well." And the next thing they knew, he was sliding under the table. Easter was nice. The eggs were silly, but the big lilies were wonderful. And when Uncle Paul got so fat from drinking that he couldn't squeeze into the pulpit anymore and had to preach from the floor, there was an elders meeting, and they said they would have the pulpit rebuilt, but Uncle Paul said no. It was the Lord's manifest will, and he would pass his remaining years in sacred studies. I liked Thanksgiving better, because that was the day Father took us down to the mills. But Easter I've liked next best, and the rabbits died because we fed them beet tops, and the lamb pulled up the grass by the roots and was sold to Mr. Page, the butcher. I asked Uncle Roberts what were sacred studies. He said he was not really sure, but he guessed they came in a bottle. And Mother sent me away from the table when I wouldn't eat my lamb chops. That was ridiculous, she said. It wasn't the Lamb of God, it was just Caesar and Andromache nibbles. But I just couldn't. And the years of the strike, we didn't go to church at all on Easter because they said it wasn't safe downtown. So instead, we had prayers in the library. And then, right in the middle, the telephone rang. It was Mr. Shupstead at the mill. They had to use tear gas, Father made a special prayer right away for God's protection and mercy. And then he sent us out to the farm with Mother. We stayed a week and missed school, but it rained a lot, and I broke the bathroom mirror and had to learn a long psalm.
I love that.
It's really great.
Oh, what a beautiful poem.
Thanks.
Yeah, it strikes so many chords right now. I'm teaching online classes and how the kids are trying to sort of assimilate this experience, also reject this experience, get their minds around it, not be overtaken by their emotions. And all of those things are so present in that poem as he, reflects on sort of how you map these experiences as a kid, because they're all novel, and yet you have that desire to make them the everyday too.
Yeah. And I love this poem because it was written, I think, a lot earlier. And, basically what I do is I send out a question every day of what should tomorrow's poem be about, and people respond saying and what they want the next day's poem to be about. And someone said Easter. And, you just do all this research. I've been reading just thousands of poems a day trying to find the right one.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's the best. It's the best thing. It helps so much right now. But sometimes, a poem just comes to you and you're like, how is reading this right now so much more impactful and so much more personal than I could ever imagine this poem being? When you read this poem right now, you're just like, this is exactly what I'm going through, but in a different world.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, a few years back, you posed a challenge to yourself. You wrote a poem a day, right? For
That's
how
true.
long?
For 252 days.
Yes.
Consecutive days.
Right. And there was some glorious work, by the way, that came out of that.
Thank you.
As an artist, what was that like, challenging yourself in that way?
You know what? I've been thinking about this a lot, actually, right now. A lot of what that was about was just, in many ways, just like keeping alive. And right at that time, I was being a payroll accountant for film, and that's a very wonderful job, but it wasn't really filling my artistic needs. And so I was just like, I need a way to like get in there and to like connect with that again. And I just one day, it was January 1st, I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm going to write a poem a day, for 252 days. That number was chosen completely randomly. And I said, let's see what this does. And it was great because, thank you for saying that some poems were really wonderful. A lot of them I think were rough, but that's just kind of the idea of the artist, is like you just kind of have to beacon out every day. You have to
Absolutely.
kind of throw it out there, like, I'm alive. This is happening today. And I think about that a lot right now, especially with artists.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, last summer there was also a project that you challenged yourself with, and it was a theater project. And reflecting upon that, it feels almost ahead of the curve in a funny way, because there were all these pieces that you did. They were small gatherings, intimate gatherings, and site specific, some in personal spaces, some in public. And you did them live, but then you also recorded some of them and essentially streamed them. And the whole project just seems like, my gosh, we were we were on the edge, or you were on the edge of something very present. Now, so take us through that project a little bit. There was also, wanted to mention this great aspect to it that I associate with, like, the playwright Charles Mee, where you put work out there, but you encourage people to mess with it, to take it on and riff with it on their own. So there was that aspect as well, which also seems incredibly um, coincidentally present. So take me through that project a little bit.
Yeah, so that project was called Another Consecutive Year of Living. And basically, the challenge that I made for myself was, I said, I will write and perform a play every week, starting on my 29th birthday until my 30th birthday, which is in a month, I think. Yes, exactly.
Uh-huh.
And so the challenge was kind of going off of the poems that I did for 252 days. I was like, well, I know that I can do a poem for that amount of time. So, like, now that that is stretched, can I stretch a little further? Um, and the idea with it was, just trying to create, again, with beaconing, just saying, like, I am going to do this play on Fridays. Anyone is welcome to show up. Anyone is welcome to come for every single play that I do. They can come for one and see if it's effective. And much like the poems, some might be really great. Some, might be not fun
Right.
for an audience. And just saying, I'm doing this thing. I'm kind of creating a journal of my life and trying to figure out what resonates with me this week. You're welcome to come and see it. And then from that, you're able to kind of see what you take from those plays and then kind of mesh them into your world. I think a lot of times people actually relate a lot more during the week, even if they're having totally different lives than they care to realize. Um, so I think in many ways that was kind of a success.
So you have been attracted to really what I would call immersive experiences. When you were in college, you would do performances that lasted, what, sometimes like 3 days, like
Yeah.
continuous. What is the fascination with that kind of immersion for you?
Yeah, I think one of the things I think about constantly when I think about, like, the stuff that I'm attracted to is, in college we did this 24-hour play festival, and it was a little bit different than the typical. You get six writers, they write 10 or six 10-minute plays, and you put them on in 24 hours. What we did was we said, here's a great American piece of work, and we're going to stage it in 24 hours. So, our first one we did Angels in America, like both parts one and part two. And we fully staged it, designed it, rehearsed it in 24 hours. And then we invited everyone to our home and just put it up. And our backyard was filled with people like drinking beer, you know, kind of watching to see if it could be done. And the thing was like, of course it was done. Like it had to have been done. But the process of that play was not necessarily, and this is kind of a secret, so don't tell the audience that went then this, but it wasn't really for them. It was for the people making the show. It was saying, how quickly can we form a community? How quickly can we get on the same language? And how quickly can we kind of figure out what we can do in this short amount of time? And I think that's kind of a lot of my work. It's not necessarily, I'm always considerate of the audience. I really want the audience to enjoy themselves and, reflect and have a moment where they can kind of latch onto something. But I think the beauty that I find in theater is like the audience is going to show up, or the audience that does show up, they just want to see if something can happen. And so your job as an artist is just to be like, I am going to put everything I can into this to show you that something can happen. Something big, something small, but, dense with emotion. And, I'm just here saying, I'm alive. Like, do you want to be here alive with me for 10 minutes, 6 hours? All right, let's do it.
And what kind of, I know you have artistic aims, but ultimately you do have an audience, and ultimately you are in connection and dialogue with that audience. What overall do you think people take away from that kind of work, rather than, I've got a theater ticket, curtain is at 8, it's 2.5 hours long, then I'm, going to get a drink with a friend and go home. So your experiences are a little bit outside of that framework. What do you think people take away from that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think where I stand kind of as an artist and what I think of right now comes from when I was working administratively at like big theaters like Steppenwolf. I was an intern there, and Court Theater in Chicago, again, an intern. And I would see, the infrastructure that those places had. And I was like, this is really amazing. This is really wonderful. But I always found myself more engaged when I would see a friend show, at college or something like that. Like, it's beautiful to see something that is, well produced, but to say afterwards to someone like, oh my God, that play was good, but that monologue you did just like brought something to me. I think it's really interesting because a lot of the plays that I see or a lot of plays that I do are naturally kind of more for my friends, or, some sort of acquaintance to me that knows or has experienced me in some way. And a lot of it is people saying, oh, like I saw that, 10, that, another consecutive year of living play back in July. And I just wanted to text you now in February to say, like, I still think about like the connection that we have through that, or the amount that you're able to just kind of be yourself in front of your friends,
Right.
is,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I did a goofy little riff on one of the plays with
It was great.
Rhiannon Fraser and Isaac Lipkowitz filmed us and edited it together. And it was a blast because it brought me back to my old improv days. Hadn't done that stuff for a long time. And there was just sort of a heightened dimensionality to these characters. There was also a sort of delicacy to them that I loved. And so through your play, through that intimate experience, I went on and took it to the next step and collaborated with 2 other artists. And so there's resonance there for me. And I think that's, different people are going to relate in different ways as far as the intimate resonance or personal resonance, but that was sort of the essence of what theater is about, that kind of experimentation and being completely present and open. So thank you. Your piece brought that back for a little bit last summer for me, and it was wonderful.
Thank you. And sorry, real quick with that too, it's a lot of the kind of reviews that I get from my friends, or I did, another consecutive year of living plays here in LA with coworkers who, barely knew me. And a lot of the things that people say is, how are you so open and honest and vulnerable in front of strangers? And I just think it's so wonderful because that's kind of what it's all about. Theater and poetry. It's all just saying, I'm going to be very vulnerable right here, and I'm going to give this very specific gift from me to you.
Right. That's great. We're going to take a quick little break, and then we'll be right back with you. Hold
Oh,
on.
wonderful. Great.
I'm back with Evan Garrett. So, Evan, you and I go way back,
Oh,
all
yes.
the way back to when you were a sixth grade student at Albuquerque Academy.
Oh my gosh.
And we did a lot. This is so funny. We did a lot of work together, didn't we?
We did.
We did a heck of a lot of shows. And one of my great fond memories is, I mean, I loved them all, but the importance of being earnest probably is one of my top faves. You were fantastic in that, and it was a delight. It was a delight working with you and all of the cast.
I keep telling my friends about that production. I say, that's when I peaked.
Well, I don't know about that. You
Yeah.
did go on to do some fusion work as well. You were in productions of The Seven. You were in the David Mamet short plays, weren't you?
I
As well?
was. Oh
Yes.
my
And
God.
then our main stage production of Clybourne Park as well. Um, so, what do you, when you think about New Mexico, we've talked about this a bit because you are a New Mexican. And we've certainly talked about that drive for a young artist to leave New Mexico and sort of forge a new life in new territory, oftentimes urban centers. But the fact that you can always come back to New Mexico for a sort of artistic centering. And I know when you come back, one of the things that you really associate with or connect with is nature. And I think you told me that the one thing that you need to do is like the La Luz Trail, right?
Yeah.
When you come back to town. I mean, how do you sort of carry New Mexico with you?
It's so funny. Like, I think this might be true for almost anyone who leaves New Mexico, and especially artists or people who are artistically inclined. Like, it's always like deep at the core of who I am, um, which is sometimes hard to admit, but it's nevertheless so true.
Yeah.
I actually had a kind of a tarot card reading that my friend just did, and it wasn't tarot cards, it was kind of archetypes, and she pulled out the desert card for me, and she was like, and it was just so funny because I was thinking, the thing about New Mexico is that it's this desert, and you kind of create your life from it. New York and LA and a lot of other places are really great, but they kind of can give you things. Whereas from Albuquerque in New Mexico, you kind of have to draw up from the world. You have to draw up from the ground because, that ground is supporting so much kind of with the limited resources that it has. It's just, yeah, there's nothing better than seeing that desert and seeing that sky. And it, especially growing up, up until 18, like there's no way that you can take that out of who you are as a person.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, along those lines, I'm going to give you the New Mexico speed round. Are you ready? We're going to do
Oh dear.
this. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Red or green?
Green.
Morning
Easy.
dove or roadrunner?
Roadrunner.
Sky or moon?
Oh, sky.
Sandias or mesa?
Mesa, actually, now.
Pinon or Spanish olive?
Oh, Pinon.
Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul?
Breaking Bad.
Good, you passed. Wonderful. So, what are you going to do in quarantine about getting yourself outside today in LA? What are you going to do?
What's so great is that I live in Silver Lake now. It's a very beautiful neighborhood, but ever since I moved here, I've never seen the neighborhood because I've always just kind of gone to work and back. And so it's the most beautiful houses, all kind of just weird and different. So I'm going to do my 30-minute walk, see some new real estate that, I'm looking to imagine myself living in.
Lovely.
And that's all I
Wonderful.
want. Yeah.
That's great. So I think you're an Elizabeth Warren fan,
Oh,
correct?
yes, I am.
Yes. So, do you think she might be a running mate?
That's a really good question. I don't think so. And I also don't know if I necessarily would want her to be. Um,
Uh-huh.
I think she has done a really good job. I'm a huge stan, so I'm really following her heavily even now. I
Right.
think she does a really good job even outside of the president's running for president of kind of being a leader. She does a really good job of holding her ground. Like she hasn't officially endorsed Biden or anyone yet. And I think part of that is because she kind of has a list of needs and demands that she needs to know are going to be taken care of before she's able to, kind of throw her weight somewhere. Um, and I think that she knows, that what she can do is not necessarily be on the sidelines, but maybe, majority leader in the Senate or some sort of cabinet position. She's got a bright future. I,
Yeah.
I I still believe that. Yeah.
So, I mean, this is a seismic event that we're in right now. How do you think, particularly people of your generation, how do you think it's going to shift the not only sort of political outlook but societal outlook as far as what's important in life coming out of this, and what's important to demand and sustain within this country?
That's a really good question. The thing that I always think about the time that we're in right now is, there were great events in history, World War One, World War Two, and we look back at them in history books and kind of imagine, what was that like? And I think for my generation, we're kind of experiencing that with, or at least we feel like we're experiencing that with. We don't know, are we going to be in our homes for another month, another 3 months, another year? Who knows what this is going to look like? I think the thing that a generation like my generation might kind of take away from this is that there were systems in place in America that we're supposed to kind of safeguard this, and I think kind of blanket the generation feels like it has failed. Um, so I think we're going to really reinvest in being political and social agents. I really do think that a lot of us are going to become more engaged rather than less, and disinterested. I think we're really going to try to fix this thing
Yeah.
because we kind of feel we for some reason we feel like it's on us more than anyone else to do it.
Well, it's true. It is. And I certainly get the same sentiments and the same sort of, I guess, political and social drive, even from the high school students that I'm teaching right now. So it buoys me up, but it doesn't make me, I guess, less saddened, embarrassed, and almost defeated in a way that my generation has essentially let you down in many ways. And it's funny because, I grew up in the 60s and 70s, which obviously were a time of huge social change. And I kind of wonder how. How did how did we get waylaid? What happened? Something happened in the 1980s around, the me generation, or that kind of self-indulgent thinking. So I'm hopeful for the future. Let me ask you this. You are a theater artist, and in your everyday life, what kind of sensibility do you think that gives you? What sort of special sensibility, or maybe special is not the word, perhaps unique perspective? How does that play in your life on a everyday, day-to-day basis?
I think that so I think about I don't remember who said this. I want to say Sarah Bareilles actually. She had an interview, or someone had an interview where they were talking about theater people, and they said theater people are the hardest working people in the world. And I think I definitely get that. Right now, I work in a more corporate job, and my coworkers are very, very good. But I think the thing that comes with theater is you learn how to work really hard, and you pull the long hours. You do the impossible, and you don't necessarily do it for much else. And I think that's the theater perspective that really changes, or that really gets into me, is like this idea that people who do theater know that hard work and doing a good job is worth more than the paycheck or something like that. It's about working hard so you can support the others that you're working with. It's very unique. I feel like maybe you understand, but I don't know if it's a thing that necessarily audiences kind of negotiate as much. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. It is something unique, and it's, you can, I guess, box it up in something called work ethic, but it goes beyond that. Because it engages a creative drive, and almost a soulful drive, and it's not, as some people think, for applause or validation. Maybe it is initially as a little kid. It was never that for me. Even as a little kid, it was really about exploring stories and sharing stories together. Um, but it's a work ethic that you take on that, you're almost you're almost a little possessed, I
Yeah.
think. is the way to describe it. And you don't necessarily want your audience to know that or pick up on that. And so maybe it's okay that they go away and think, oh, those people, they like to play those characters, and isn't that nice? And they don't know that sort of possessed drive behind it. Um, so one of the things that, of course, we've been dealing with at Fusion is when we're on the other side of all this, how do we gather again? How do we come back together? How can audiences feel good about gathering, feel safe about gathering, and be open enough to the work? Because I think that we're going to have some shock from this. I think we're going to have you know, uh, feelings of insecurity even about going out. Um, what sort of words of wisdom would you give me?
I don't I don't know if I have any good words of wisdom. I think,
Yeah.
it's a really good question. It's the same thing in the film industry. How are we going to feel comfortable bringing 200 people together to kind of, go on a stage and tell this story? One of my kind of anecdotally, my friend is at the Yale School of Drama right now, and they had to, move over to online classes. And I forget who the professor was, and I forget what the class was, but the professor did this kind of spiel at the end of class. It was the end of the semester and the end of class. And the professor was just like, theater is the most important thing in the entire world. People in the same room together, breathing the same breath, learning the same things. And it was just so funny because everyone was on this Zoom call, just like, we're not in the same room, like we don't feel like that's going to happen anytime soon. I think, you know, the good news is that when things do get back in order, um, I think that people are going to people are going to miss each other so much, and people are going to miss the liveness of these things so much that it's going to be that first few months when we're trying to figure out, like, is it safe, is it okay, like what are the moral questions about this. Kind of once those are kind of sequestered or lifted, I think people are just going to rush because they just we need these things. Even people who never saw a play before quarantining are going to say, what was I missing in life? Like I could have had this and I didn't. And then I had, 3 months where I couldn't do anything. So let's give this the college try and see what a theater, what a performance can feel like. And I think
Yeah.
the actors and the theater staff is probably going to feel similarly like, let's put on the best show ever. So maybe after this, we're going to have the best confluence of, really receptive, excited, engaged audience members and really passionate, driven, needing to perform theater artists. We could
I
we could
think
have some of the best stuff.
we can. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Evan, happy Easter.
Happy
Thank you
Easter.
so much for engaging in our little interview today.
Oh
And
my God, thank
I
you.
wish you much health and creativity in the land of Tinseltown over there. And thank you so much. Have a
Thank you so
great
much.
rest of your day.
You
Bye
too.
bye.
Bye.